Hello, the internet, and welcome to episode 6 of Julian Scout on Comic. We are shooting from our fabulous sound control booth of our theater. Like, that's where we shot episode 3, right out there in the theater, and this is the sound control booth for it. Now, we didn't actually recommend a book at the end of last episode. Well, we sort of didn't. Actually, what we did was we recommended a book, and then we had to kind of unrecommend it because once we read through it, I wasn't comfortable with the content of the book. There was some adult themed mature stuff in it that I thought was kind of gratuitous, and it didn't really have much to do with the story. So I balked at the recommendation. We actually lopped off the last couple minutes of the video. That book was Rat Queens, and if you want to read it, more power to you, but just know that it has some adult content. And in the future, we may recommend some comic books that have adult content. Because if you just stick to Marvel and DC, you're missing out on a lot of good stories. But some of the stuff will have some adult content in it, mature content, and much like some of the other stuff, you know, in the district, in the holdings that we have. But we'll try and warn you ahead of time. I'll try and read through them before we recommend them, and if it's got some adult content in it, we'll make note of it before we say, hey, you guys should read this, and you might enjoy it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing it's worth mentioning is we decided to read Lady Thor. It's actually just called Thor, the Goddess of Thunder by Aaron Douterman and Molina. I really like this book.
Yes.
I was surprised how much I liked it because I thought it just seemed like a kind of an attempt to remake the Marvel Universe in a more inclusive image. And I thought maybe it was just a throwaway story that was trying to make a Lady Thor. It was actually a really cool, detailed story. When I look at that picture of Lady Thor, you know what I think of? Okay, so she puts on her helmet, she's got the hammer, and she's got her battle dress, and she's super tough, and then she has to go over to the mirror and put on her cranberry lipstick.
That's part of the costume.
That's a little, guys don't have to do that. That's, I don't know. It's like, can you picture Superman making sure his seams are straight? Are my seams straight? That's just weird, right?
No, it's true, yeah.
It's a little much. I did like the way she speaks. Isn't it cool how she thinks like, I actually know who she is. There's the big reveal is in another episode who this person actually is.
I'm just gonna Google it.
So I won't ruin it because that's not in this book. But when she thinks like a human being, but when she speaks, verily she doth speak like Thor. And that's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun.
The thought bubbles on that really helped kind of give it more dimension, I feel like.
It made her character very relatable, whereas I always had trouble relating to Thor, because he seemed kind of stiff, and I never really was a big Thor fan. But recently, they've softened his character. I like that Thor's goats were in it. Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder, I think, are the name of his.
Is that okay?
I'm not positive that's the name of them, but they're like magical super goats.
He's like, on one panel, he's like, I have to go get my goats. And I kind of busted out laughing at that point. I'm like, why do you mean that? Like, oh, they're like your horses.
What are you going to do? Yeah, they pull his chariot thing. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay, so Thor always had cheesy threats. Because he's not the smartest guy. And so he's more, back in the day they didn't really play that up. But more recently, they kind of picture Thor as being a little bit thick. He's really about bashing stuff, and he's not a deep thinker, but it makes for some fun comedy. At one point, Thor, now this is the female Thor, she's thinking about how she's going to go clobber some frost giants, but instead of saying something, she says, and I would have words with them. And in Thor speak, that means she's going to go kick some big frozen behind. Yes. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that she could do something with the hammer that Thor couldn't. Like she could make the hammer kind of go spastically in a little tight circle and just kind of wipe people out. And Thor didn't have that ability. I like that.
Yeah, I like that she added something to the character.
I love the lame insults. Those are good.
Oh my gosh, yeah, the little one-liners again.
Those were good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the one thing that I thought was a little bit, I really like the art. When it flips to this art at the end, you can barely see that. It's female Thor fighting Absorbing Man. But like that dark lush, it almost looks painted.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that art. It was just a subtle change from the stuff before.
Yeah.
But the stuff before was really good art too. Really liked that art. I did not particularly like the scene. She's fighting Odin's son. Thor goes by Odin's son now that he's lost his hammer, and he's got a bionic arm because Malekith cut his arm off.
Yeah.
And because he's immortal, the arm's out there somewhere. He'll get it back at some point someday, I guess.
So,
It was like they pictured it in a pile of stuff at one point in the comic. Like, oh yeah, there's Thor's arm right there.
Oh, just chilling?
Yeah, just kind of
out?
hanging out, like waiting
that's
for Thor to come
interesting.
find it.
Oh.
So Thor and Odin's son, they fight and they fight and they fight. And finally Thor's like, okay, you can carry the hammer. I'm not going to mess with you. And then female Thor's like, oh, okay. And she smooches him.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere.
That really, if you know who the character is, it explains that a little bit.
Okay.
But in the context of this book, it's like, well, did she just smooch him for? That seems
Yeah.
so, like, it seems like such a, like a girly thing to do. Oh, I was just overcome and I had to kiss him. And it's like, come on, you just spent the whole book trying to shatter some gender stereotypes by having a butt-kicking female hero.
Yeah.
And then she can't control herself and she has to smooch Thor. Now, having said that,
Felt
look,
weird. Felt forced.
Thor's pretty dreamy. I
He
mean,
is
but-
pretty dreamy, but he's, you know,
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really
Wasn't
dig
feeling
that. Okay, so I was mentioning how much I really like the artwork, and I watched a video online of a guy that was bad-mouthing John Romita Jr. and saying that the only reason John Romita Jr. had a job in comic books was because he was John Romita Sr.'s son, completely discounting any kind of quality in his artwork. And the guy really, really bashed John Romita Jr.'s artwork, and because Julie is a professional artist.
Professional, yes.
She's professional, guys.
Super.
That's verifiable. So I wanted to get your opinion on bad art, good art versus bad art, because like we were talking about before we started shooting, that like a 4-year-old draws something with crayon and it's bad art. Jackson Pollock makes a painting that looks like a drop cloth and it's phenomenal art, but they don't really look all that much different. So
Yeah.
quality art. What's quality art versus what's crud?
So, at least like in the context of comics, do you want to keep it, or just broadly?
Let's go broadly. Let's do the
Broadly.
broad thing.
Okay, so I guess
Professional artist.
professional speaker right now. You Google it. My name. It comes up. Professional artist and speaker.
I didn't know it was on the Google. That's
Yes.
pretty serious.
But I guess to know whether it's good or bad art, there has to be some level of technical skill or ability to the point where you can know how to do shading, but if you choose not to, there's a certain point that you're trying to convey by making it look more childish or more flat or more 2D.
Okay.
So I think if you're trying to convey a certain point that you're deconstructing something, for example, and you're making it look terrible, because making it look terrible has a certain point in certain...
You're trying. Okay, I got you.
It's not just like, oh, you don't know better. It's, no, this is your intention for the piece. That's kind of a definition of good art, bad art.
Okay.
I mean, it's still so subjective.
It's
I
really
mean,
hard to
like,
say that's bad art.
Some Pollock, like, I understand what he did with his art. Personally, I don't like it. Like, I look at it and it's paint splatters on a wall. Okay.
Have you ever heard the story of a Jackson Pollock painting got stolen and the police were looking for it, and they actually opened up the back of a van, and the Jackson Pollock painting was just kind of casually thrown in the back of the van, and they were like, oh, that's a drop cloth. And they missed the $1 million painting because it was a drop cloth.
Okay.
Boy, that went by really quick.
That did.
That was only 8 minutes. So
Yeah.
that makes me think of the Jackson Pollock story. There was something else the art story made me think of. Anyway, so let's talk about what we're going to recommend for next time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, guys, we might recommend something that has a little mature content. I'll try and give you guys a heads up before we do. For instance, this was one of the books that I had considered recommending for the next episode. Looking through this, Saga is supposedly some really cracking good sci-fi. It's an epic, like science fiction opera.
Mm-hmm.
But this one has some scenes in it that I am not comfortable recommending. So again, Saga and Rat Queens have some adult content. Be warned, if you want to read them, knock yourself out. I read Rat Queens and didn't really enjoy it. That was the main thing, more than anything. Instead of like reading it and had content in it that I found objectionable, or I figured someone might find objectionable, but I really loved it, so I wanted to recommend it, that would have been one thing. But I was reading it and I was it seemed like it was aimed at 12-year-old boys, which a lot of comics are. There's really nothing wrong with that. But it was aimed at like the prurient interests of 12-year-old boys, which is not really good. So I brought in two that I'll let Julie pick from. for the next episode. One is the Logan Legacy. I think Logan ends up, I don't know, he either ends up dead or...
That's the ending? Did you just spoil the ending?
Well, look, he's flying apart at the seams here.
Oh, he's like a cyborg.
Well, I think that's
Oh,
his.
that's the skeleton?
I think that's his skeleton, and it's got Sabretooth and Lady Deathstrike, and I think that's I think that's Wolverine's son. That's his daughter. That's Mystique. So that's one of the choices. Yeah, X-23 is his daughter. Have you seen Logan, the movie Logan?
Oh, not the newest one? No.
It's super cool and really sad. Okay, and then the other one is one that I know nothing about called Mother Panic. It's got a little Batman on the cover, but there's not much Batman inside. I think it's a new DC hero. I see a little Batwoman. Like, I have no idea who Mother Panic is. So I thought that was interesting. And we haven't recommended any DC yet.
Yeah.
In fact, I have specifically badmouthed some DC. So just for some equal time.
I like this one.
All right, you want to do Mother Panic?
Do
Okay,
this
so
one.
for next episode, for episode 7, we'll read Mother Panic. Again, caveat, I may recommend some stuff that has some adult content in it. Mother Panic doesn't, but at some point in the future we might, and we'll try and give you a big heads up ahead of time. I didn't even really realize that when we were talking about, we had talked about this a little bit, about maybe recommending some stuff that had mature content. And I had kind of forgotten that East and West had piles of dead bodies in it. Remember that?
Oh.
And I didn't even think twice about that.
Yeah.
So,
it's so commonplace.
That's the American sensibility is violence is okay, but anytime there's like anything sexual or nudity or something, it's like, and that's kind of what it came down to.
Yeah, that. Well then.
God, that went by really quick.
Yeah.
Anything else? What else?
I think that's.
Julie's a professional artist.
Yes.
How was Italy?
Beautiful. It was stunning. It was really hard to come back.
Was it molto bella?
Yeah, see.
All right, that's all we got, guys. We'll see you for episode 7. Thanks for watching.
Ciao.
Good night, the internet.